Take it over to 45. Leave it on the out.
Hey everyone, this is Tommy Stewart Stazeski from the YouTube channel Tom Stewart Drums. Thanks for joining me this week, and I'm going to be starting a series that will focus on drummers that I feel are underappreciated, underrated, flew under the radar, however you want to frame that. There's, the obvious guys. You have the John Bonhams and the Keith Moons and the Neil Pearts and the Mike Portnoys and the Ringo Starrs of the world that are all given accolades for their drumming skills over the years, and rightfully so, obviously. And then there's guys that are kind of like in the middle ground. I would say guys like Bunny Carlos from Cheap Trick and like Phil Rudd from AC/DC, that sort of get a lot of respect from drummers, but not a whole lot of attention from like the general public. And I'm not even going to include them in this because I feel like they're even a little more well known than a lot of these guys that I'm going to focus on, because they're in such huge bands, and they do get the respect and the acknowledgement that is so deserved for a lot of these guys. But most of the drummers that I'm going to focus on in this ongoing series are going to be drummers that I personally love the way that they play. It's not necessarily about chops and about being able to do an amazing drum solo or being flashy or anything like that. Most of these guys play for the song, which is really important to me. I actually, prefer a drummer who knows how to lock in with a pocket in a groove and does not overplay. In some instances, in some bands, overplaying is required. Overplaying is a touchy phrase to use, because is it really overplaying if you're in Rush or if you're in Yes or Genesis or Dream Theater or any of these more modern prog rock bands? Probably not, because that's what's required of that kind of music. So it's not really overplaying. But if you're playing like Neil Peart and you're in AC/DC, then that would be considered overplaying. Yeah, that's not. And I always have this discussion or argument or debate over the years online about, well, Neil Peart blows away Ringo Starr, or Mike Portnoy blows away, Phil Rudd, or, just take any flashy prog chops oriented style drummer, Billy Cobham or, anybody. Just, it doesn't matter. There's a million of them. The argument is, are they better than, I don't know, a John Bonham or a Ringo Starr or a Charlie Watts or whatever? Guys that are more about pocket and feel and locking in to just a groove or whatever. And because a lot of what those guys do is simplistic in nature as far as technically. Can Neil Peart play anything Charlie Watts plays? Well, of course he can. Can Charlie Watts play anything Neil Peart can? Probably not. Well, he's passed now, so, but I'm saying when he was alive. Bad example. But let's just say even like a Phil Rudd from AC/DC. Now, or Ringo, whose fills are deceptively, not complicated, but just interesting and different, especially for the time frame of the 60s. He was doing things that a lot of other drummers weren't doing, which he doesn't get enough credit for. But drummers know. You'll see videos from guys like Portnoy and Dave Grohl or whoever going on and on about the genius of Ringo Starr, and they're not wrong. But I've always argued that it's not about who's better, it's about who's right for that band. Because you could take a Neil Peart, when he was alive, of course, and throw him in the Rolling Stones or throw him into the Beatles or into AC/DC. Can he play the parts? Yes, obviously, yes, he can. There's nothing super complicated there. But would he have the right feel? You know, is the Stones would not sound like the Rolling Stones with Neil on drums. They just would not. Would not have the same feel, would not have the same tone and sound. It would be a completely different band with a drummer like Neil. Even if he's playing the same parts, like it even goes to guitar players. I've seen these guys that are classically trained guitarists, you know, they went to GIT or whatever and can play circles around guys. You throw them in a cover band and they can't play Back in Black properly with the same feel and tone and, you know, whatever that invisible ingredient is, they can't play it the way like an Angus Young can. How do you explain that? It's not a technical thing, it's a feel thing. And a sound and just an approach and how you hit the strings, or in the drummer's case, how you hit a snare drum. A lot of the guys on my drumming list are guys who I love their snare sound. I love how they hit the snare. They're rim shot guys, basically. There's a certain approach and attack that they have that is not necessarily complicated, but it's very effective, and it worked in the bands that they were in, and it elevated the bands that they were in. Like the guy that I'm starting out with on this video is a guy named Tony Brock, who was in the BABYS in the 70s. And if you're not familiar with the BABYS, well, let's just go over some of the songs that they had out in the 70s. Midnight Rendezvous. Every Time I Think of You, Isn't It Time?
You is a warmth that I thought I could never find. Just trying to decide, or stay by your side. I know I could cry, I just can't find the answers to the questions that keep going through my mind. Hey babe, isn't it time?
Head First.
Well, the first time that I saw you, you looked down and out. I had my doubts about you. But baby, since I come to know you, I ain't got no doubts what it's about. Me and baby, we're going out tonight. She's gonna treat me right. Ooh, yeah. Me and sugar, we've got it all sewn up. She fills my loving cup. We're going head first.
Back on My Feet Again.
You lie on my face with your jokes and your smiles, and the way that you came every night. Don't know what you got, but I'm sure glad I found you. Could be wrong, but it sure feels right. And here I am, I'm back on my feet again. Here I am, I'm back on my feet again. I was out
had some minor radio airplay, and there really wasn't MTV back then, but they were on the Midnight Special a lot, and like video shows that weren't MTV, like in the 70s.
Up in the sky and deep in the sea, I'm looking for love. Where can it be?
You saw them around. They were in magazines. They were in Circus. They might have been in Cream a few times. They had a push behind them. You know, they were on Chrysalis, which I don't think is necessarily the strongest label for promoting rock music, kind of like how RCA was too, or MCA and RCA were both considered like graveyards for rock bands. If you got signed to either one of those two labels, you could pretty much forget it because they really didn't know how to handle a rock band. But that's another subject. But anyway, the BABYS had some exposure. They were on a lot of tours. They did manage to headline some smaller theaters on their own towards the end. They were formed in 1976. They put out 5 really solid studio albums. Borderline like power pop-ish meets like Bad Company-ish, like 70s rock, and kind of hard to pigeonhole. There is a lot of power pop elements to their music and a lot of just 70s guitar-based rock with a lot of hooks and melodies. You got John Waite fronting your band. I mean, you're 10 steps ahead of the game right there. The band was incredible, all excellent musicians. The 5 records they put out, self-titled debut in 1976, produced by Bob Ezrin. Doesn't have a whole lot of Bob Ezrin touches to it. It sounds like a basic hard rock record. You know, there's not a lot of that crazy Ezrin stuff going on this record, but it's a solid debut. Then they followed that up with Broken Heart in 77, and then Head First in December of 78, which I always thought was 79. Because it came out in late 78, so I considered that like their 1979 record. Then they came out with Union Jacks in January of 1980, and then by the end of 1980, they put out their last album, On the Edge. Now for Union Jacks and On the Edge, they had Jonathan Cain join the band on keyboards and rhythm guitar. As you all know, Jonathan Cain ended up going to Journey after the BABYS broke up. They toured together. The guys in Journey saw him and basically stole him from the BABYS as soon as the BABYS were, pretty much ready to split up after just putting out 5 records and not having any massive success. Which leads me to, I'm going to be doing another series of bands that should have been more successful, or bands that should have been huge, or however you want to put it. The BABYS are going to be one of the bands in that series, and I'll go into deeper dives on their material and their songs and their albums and stuff like that when I end up doing that. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to keep it brief on the BABYS. My first drummer in this series of underappreciated drummers is Tony Brock. He's also played with Roy Orbison, Eddie Money, Jeff Beck, Bernie Taupin, and then after the BABYS split up, Rod Stewart snatched him up to replace Carmine Appice, and you can see Tony in some of the Rod Stewart early MTV videos, like Tonight I'm Yours. I'll probably drop a clip in here and there. So he ended up being with Rod Stewart for a little while during that whole early 80s period. He is just a rock solid old school drummer, probably in that Simon Kirke, John Bonham sort of mode. Killer snare sound on every Babies record. He was a Ludwig guy, which is another reason that I really like him. And so as a Ludwig guy, I believe he was playing a supraphonic Ludwig snare, which just has that crack, you know. And the way he tuned it, you know, the snares weren't too tight. They were just loose enough, right on the edge where you're getting the sound of the drum, you know, that it's, you know, the resonance and the tone of the drum, and not just, you know, when the snares are too tight, it chokes the drum and it ends up sounding like you're throwing like rocks against like aluminum siding. It's like a, you know, I hate that snare sound. I like a deep, for this kind of music anyway, a deep, throaty, like, you know, thick sounding snare drum that has just enough crack from the snares, but you're getting that tone of the drum at the same time. Guys like Michael DeRosier, you know, obviously Bonham, especially live Bonham. You listen to that when the West Was Won live triple CD set, snares killer on that. If you're a drummer, you get it. Brian Tichy does a lot of drumming videos about his Ludwigs, and he gets it. You know, he knows how to tune it up. It's what I strive for in most of my band scenarios. Now, in some bands, it's not appropriate for that kind of music. When I was in Journey tribute band for a while, Separate Ways, I used the Ludwig walnut shell snare, wood shell. Used pretty much a dry head on it with some, you know, a muffle ring on it, and really dropped the tuning low to get more of a fat sound. It sounds like ass in your ears, and it sounds like shit on stage, but like, you know, when you're like right in front of the drum. But once it's mixed out front through a mic and they EQ it, it's got just a fat sound to it. And if they bring up enough attack in it, it's got the crack at the same time. So that's a perfect sound for that kind of music, like a deep, fat crack to it. Deep, fat crack. That sounds a little, I don't know. I might want to rephrase that. Next. But anyway, drummers get it. In fact, if there's some videos of Todd Sucherman, So I get Sucherman. I don't know. I forget how to pronounce it. From Styx. He talks about how he has to tune his snare drum in order to get that sound out front. And he explains about how he hates the way it sounds acoustically, like right in front of him. Sounds like dog shit. You know, it's like, it's just mushy, and it doesn't have a good sound right when you're sitting right on top of it. But once it's run through the mics and they EQ it out front, that's how you have to get that sound. And unfortunately, unless you can get a good ear mix, a lot of times I didn't like the way it sounded in my ears either, because it just doesn't cut, you know, because it's tuned so low. There's ways around that. I just didn't want to go about buying all the gear and to mix and EQ it for my ears. It's just, I don't know. I'm kind of old school. I just wanted to set it and forget it. But anyway, so Tony Brock, rock solid drummer, has that snare sound. I'm going to drop a few clips in here and there. Just not a flashy guy. Not, you know, I don't even know if he did drum solos with the Babies. They were usually an opening act, so I don't even know if he had the time to do anything like that. But it doesn't matter. He had a great pocket, had a great feel, always had cool looking drum kits.
She's my girl. She's my world. She's my baby. She's my girl.
anything from like early on, like a small little bottom kind of setup.
They call me a wild man. I'll never know. They call me a wild man 'cause I break the law.
Expanded it later on to have, like, you know, the 6-inch toms running all the way around to the always a single bass drum as well. No double pedals back then.
'Cause baby, you got such good love. Love don't prove I'm right. No, no, love don't prove. Who you used to celebrate. Now you'll have to wait. You're gonna wait.
He had the big Hal Blaine, Neil Peart, tiny tom set up all the way around to the big toms, and then he broke it up with the ride right over the kick drum, kind of like where the same placement like I like to have mine, kind of where Bonham had his and stuff. It's just easy to reach. I never liked having a ride cymbal way up high in the air, or where I had, like, my arm had to be up like this all night, you know, because these guys that play like that, by the time they're in their 50s and 60s, they got shoulder issues, and luckily I don't. So I like everything kind of like in reach, you know, like ergonomically, or whatever the term is, I like just being able to hit it. I don't want to have to take a taxi to hit a crash cymbal. You see some of these guys, their crashes are like 5 feet in the air, and you got to really reach. You want to make a fast crash hit, and you got to reach all the way up here. I'd rather just have it right here, you know, like that's just me. But anyway, Tony Brock had a cool setup, always had a cool sound, had cool looking drums, some different finishes and stuff like that over the years. Just a great underappreciated drummer. He's just one of those guys that you will not read about or see in like Modern Drummer magazine all that often, if ever. I don't even know if they've ever done a feature on him. Maybe online they did. You'll see some podcast interviews with him and stuff like that. But, you know, he's just one of them guys that is just, he's there in the background, laying it down, and the Babies' sound was greatly enhanced by the fact that he was their drummer. You know, you could have had another guy in there that just didn't have that crack on the snare drum, wasn't as solid. You know, he was a hard hitter, but he knew how to lay back, you know, when he had to on the ballads and stuff like that. Just a perfect drummer for this band. And again, you could have thrown somebody else in there that maybe was technically a little more flashy or whatever. But it wouldn't have sounded the same, wouldn't have worked. He was the right kind of drummer. I think he was a British guy. He just had that feel, the pocket, the sound. So anybody that's interested in checking out any of Tony Brock's discography, you can look up his stuff on YouTube and Spotify, and, you know, I'll be sprinkling in some clips in and out of this video, which you've probably already seen by this point. And coming up soon, I'm going to be doing some other drummers in this series. One of them will be Barry Brandt from Angel. Yeah, there's about maybe 12 or 15 drummers that I'm going to do this series on, just to get the names out there and get some appreciation. I mean, I'm nobody, you know, it's not like I'm getting a million views on my videos, but I feel like I like to just put this out there for other drummers and other musicians and fans to get exposed to some of these guys who really didn't get a lot of exposure, and because they deserve it. Great drummers, all of them. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Deep dives and rankings of albums, pop culture discussion, classic old school wrestling, some drums, and whatever the hell I feel like. So if you enjoy any of that sort of stuff, if you like podcasts by Rick Beato, Three Sides of the Coin, The Contrarians, Billy Corgan, stuff like that, please check out my channel, Tom Stewart Drums on YouTube, and subscribe. I hope to see you there.